He didn't say goodbye with a wave. He said it with tears. That was the moment no one in the Dodgers clubhouse expected to see. Not on a day that was already heavy with news. Not on a day when the team's franchise catcher had just gone under the knife. Not on a day when a phone call changed the roster in ways that would take weeks to fully understand. But there it was. Will Smith, lying in a hospital bed, a gift in his hands, and tears he couldn't hold back anymore. This is the story of 4 moments that happened inside the same organization, in the same week, and yet felt like they belonged to 4 completely different worlds. One was about pain. One was about loyalty. One was about something that cannot be written into any contract. And one was about a farewell that cut deeper than anyone expected. It started, as most difficult stories do, with a silence no one wanted to hear. Will Smith had been grinding through it for weeks. That was the part the box score never showed. The part the highlights never captured. The neck had been bothering him since early June. What started as something that felt like a bad night's sleep, as Dave Roberts himself described it, had quietly grown into something that refused to go away. Disc inflammation. The kind of injury that doesn't announce itself loudly. It just wears you down, day by day, at-bat by at-bat, until the body says enough. He was shut down from baseball activities. Then he was shut down again. The timeline kept shifting. Every time the Dodgers thought they were close to getting him back, the neck pushed back harder than the optimism. And then came the news that changed everything. Surgery. The word landed in the Dodgers' world with the kind of weight that doesn't belong in July. Surgery meant it was no longer a matter of rest and recovery. It meant someone had decided that waiting was no longer an option. It meant that Will Smith, the heartbeat of the Dodgers catching department, the man who had been behind the plate for 2 consecutive World Series championships, would now be placed on the 30-day injured list. 30 days. At minimum. For a team built on the belief that they are one of the most complete rosters in baseball history, losing your starting catcher for a month is not a footnote. It is a chapter. And the Dodgers knew it. Dave Roberts sat in front of the cameras with the look of a manager who had already run through every scenario in his head. He wasn't panicking. But he wasn't pretending either. His voice was measured, careful, the way it always is when the news is difficult but the season is still long. There are things you can plan for, he said. And then there are things that just happen. Will Smith going under the knife was one of those things. What the Dodgers did next said everything about how this organization operates. They didn't wait. They didn't hope the situation would fix itself. They made a phone call, and by the time the dust settled, a name that Dodgers fans had already learned to trust was back where he had always seemed to belong. Ben Rortvedt. The announcement came quietly, the way most front office decisions do. But nothing about what Rortvedt means to this team is quiet. Not when you understand the history. Not when you remember September of last year, when both Will Smith and Dalton Rushing went down at almost the same time, and Rortvedt became something the Dodgers didn't even know they needed. He started 15 of the final 21 regular season games. He handled the pitching staff with the kind of calm that veteran catchers spend a decade trying to develop. He hit. He threw. He showed up every single night and did the job without drama, without noise, without anything resembling hesitation. The Dodgers pitchers noticed. The coaches noticed. And when the postseason came, he was there for the first 4 games, squatting behind the plate in the most important moments of the year. This time, the deal was different. 4 years. Not a waiver claim. Not a 1-year arrangement to avoid arbitration. 4 years. The kind of commitment that tells a player something real. The kind of number that doesn't come from a front office just filling a gap. It comes from a front office that has watched someone closely enough to believe in what they see. Rortvedt didn't say much when the news came out. He didn't need to. The contract said everything his words didn't have to. But somewhere in that signing, in that 4-year commitment, there was a quiet acknowledgement of what the Dodgers had discovered about him. He was not a backup in the traditional sense. He was not someone brought in to simply keep the seat warm. He was someone this organization had decided was worth keeping around long after the crisis had passed. And now the crisis was back. And he was back with it. The hospital room was not a place anyone expected to become a story. Shohei Ohtani visited Will Smith. That sentence, on its own, might not seem like much. Teammates visit each other. It happens. It is one of the quieter traditions of a long baseball season. But what happened inside that room was something that the people who were there are not likely to forget for a very long time. Ohtani brought a gift. The details of what it was have not been made fully public. And in some ways, that is the right way for it to stay. Because the gift itself was almost beside the point. What mattered was the moment. What mattered was the look on Will Smith's face when he received it. He was moved to tears. Not the kind of tears that come from sadness. Not the kind that belong to a man who is grieving. These were something else. Something harder to name. The kind of tears that arrive when someone does something for you that reminds you why you chose this life in the first place. The kind that catch you off guard because you weren't expecting to feel that much in that moment. Ohtani sat with him. Not for a few minutes, the way a courtesy visit goes. He stayed. And for those who have followed Ohtani long enough to understand who he is beneath the numbers, beneath the home runs and the strikeouts and the records and the headlines, that visit was not surprising at all. It was completely consistent with the person he has always been. The one who shows up when people need him, not just when the cameras are on. Will Smith, lying in that hospital bed, bandaged and sidelined and removed from everything he had worked toward, was reminded of something that no team meeting or motivational speech could have delivered. He was reminded that he was not alone in this. And that reminder came with tears. Then came the farewell. It arrived differently than the other 3 moments. There was no surgery. There was no signing. There was no hospital room. There was only a clubhouse, and a locker, and a conversation that had been a long time coming. Dalton Rushing was leaving. The writing had been on the wall for months. Ken Rosenthal had said it plainly. Rushing would be better off somewhere else. Not because he wasn't good enough for the Dodgers. He was. He is. The numbers made that embarrassingly clear. 7 home runs in 28 plate appearances. A batting average that made scouts stop and look twice. A young catcher with power and presence and the kind of ceiling that most organizations would mortgage futures to acquire. But this was the Dodgers. And on this team, even a ceiling like Rushing's had nowhere to go. Not with Will Smith ahead of him. Not with Shohei Ohtani occupying the designated hitter role that would have been Rushing's natural outlet for at-bats. Not with a roster so deep that excellence was sometimes the thing standing in your own way. The Texas Rangers had been named. The Yankees had been whispered. The conversation about trading Rushing had moved from speculation to something that felt, slowly and then all at once, like inevitability. And so the goodbye came. Rushing walked through the clubhouse for the last time as a Dodger and found Ohtani. What passed between them in that moment is the kind of thing that doesn't survive translation into a press conference quote. It was not a speech. It was not a formal goodbye. It was 2 people who had shared something real, something that only teammates who go through long seasons together can fully understand, standing in front of each other and knowing that the next time they saw each other, it would be from opposite dugouts. Rushing had deleted his social media. He had spoken about the emotional weight of playing in Los Angeles, about how deeply he had invested himself in this team, about how some things stay with you long after the uniform changes. And Ohtani, the man who had once spoken about areas where Rushing still needed to grow, the man who saw in that young catcher both the fire and the rough edges that reminded him, perhaps, of his own journey, stood there and said what needed to be said. No reporters. No cameras. No microphones pointed at them waiting to capture the moment and package it into content. Just two baseball players at a crossroads, one leaving and one staying, both understanding that the game had made this decision for them. Rushing walked out of Dodger Stadium knowing something important. He had been part of something real here. 2 World Series championships in back-to-back years. Nights behind the plate in the most pressure-filled moments the sport offers. Conversations with Ohtani about what it means to want more and do more and be more. He was taking all of that with him. For stories. For moments. 1 week inside the most watched organization in baseball. Will Smith on the operating table. Ben Rortvedt signing a commitment that finally matched what everyone already knew he was worth. Shohei Ohtani sitting in a hospital room until the tears came. Dalton Rushing walking toward the door and stopping one last time to say goodbye to the man who had, in his quiet way, shaped how he understood what it meant to be a professional. None of these moments happened on a scoreboard. None of them will appear in the final statistics of the season. They will not show up in the box score. They will not be part of any highlight package that runs during the 7th-inning stretch. But they are the reason this team is what it is. The Dodgers do not win back-to-back championships because they have the best roster on paper, though they do. They win because of what happens in the spaces between the games. In the hospital rooms. In the quiet corners of a clubhouse. In the final conversation between a man who is leaving and a man who made him want to stay. Shohei Ohtani brought a gift to a teammate in a hospital bed. That is not something written in any rulebook. There is no clause in any contract that required it. There is no statistic that measures it. But Will Smith was moved to tears. And in the end, that says more about this team than any box score ever could.